couple things about them after we're done here with Josh and Josh. I'm not sure who's speaking first, but
So I'm Josh, one of them with Ohio Addiction Recovery Center. First and foremost, thanks for having me. It's an honor to share the stage with a lot of great people and a lot of great resources that are out there. A little bit about me, I'm kind of sitting up here thinking, like, what am I going to tell you? Because you're getting hit with a lot of information and how to apply that. You're all here you have your own reasons for being here. Some of you raised your hand when the question was asked that, do you have a loved one that's struggling? Or some of you might know someone, but you're here for your own reasons. And the information that you're getting is great. And I think some key things to take away are this. And before I get into that, my story is I'm in recovery. Grew up in the church. And I was sitting here thinking, like, of all these great speakers, like, when I got my DUI, my second one, there was an EMS guy that took me to the hospital. And then there was an officer there to meet me at the hospital because obviously you shouldn't be driving or drinking and driving at that point. And that led me down the road to, getting involved in drugs. And there was an individual from not necessarily the DA, but the sheriff's department in my town that kind of got me in front of a judge that sentenced me to some time in prison. And because of that time in prison, it was a little different. I was able to get out and go to treatment, and that's what saved my life. I had family members and my parents, they loved me so much that it crossed the line to enabling. And for those that don't understand that, you don't know it until you know it. And a lot of times that we love the individuals that's struggling, that we give them money, we give them a roof, they have TV to watch, they have food to eat, but the addiction that we don't want to admit that's going on with the person that we care about is, in my family, they had crossed that. They couldn't pay for attorneys to get me out of the situation, so the courts actually saved my life. And it's, this is a umpteen number of years ago, but it's crazy because I get to sit here and share a little bit about me. And you've been hit with all this information, but let's talk about solutions. So we do represent, myself and Josh, we represent Ohio Addiction Recovery Center. We've been around for a little more, around 6 years. Just moved to Grove City. We were in Columbus. Moved to Grove City, and we're kind of that all-level encompassing the medical stabilization, the quote-unquote 30-day treatment program, and then we have outpatient and housing, which is, if not more important, just as important as the residential component of treatment. But a lot of times, you have someone that they need treatment. They know they need treatment, but they're not in treatment. And that question that, we have to ask ourselves is why? And, the gentleman right here said there has to be a willingness on the individual that's struggling. And that can't happen until sometimes parents, loved ones, have to help open that person's eyes. And how do you do that? You let them know what's going on. Yeah, I mean, there are conversations, and there are tough conversations, but they're either going to be had now or they're going to be had later. And it's up to you, if you know someone that's struggling, of when to have that one. And sometimes that conversation is repeated. It's kind of like, are we doing this again? And the frustration level gets high. As if any of you are here and you have a loved one that's struggling, you're a hostage, because the person that you love and that you care about is not the person that, if it was your daughter or your son that you raised. When they're in the throes of their addiction, that's just a person that they're called kind of in that rat race. That's, when's my next high? What am I going to do to accomplish that high? And, you've heard of the routes that an individual can go from law enforcement, from, prostitution to theft, to a different array of avenues. And the bottom line is we have to cut it off as quick as we can. And sometimes that conversation is hard to have, but it's a necessary conversation. I always say it's kind of a little pain now or a lot of pain later. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, and we kind of swept things under the rug. If you were the town drunk, or you were this person's son or this person's daughter, then you were labeled, but there weren't really options out there. It's just kind of, oh, that's so-and-so. And with that stigma that we carried each and every day, sometimes you kind of just say, well, you know what, everybody says I'm this, I might as well be this to the best of my ability. So we know that people are struggling and that they have issues, but the reality is there are solutions out there. And the solutions, if someone is willing to get help, you just heard of different types of treatment modalities. When I say different types of treatment modalities, you talk about inpatient. If anybody doesn't know what that is, that's your 30 days walk into facility, learn about yourself, learn about what's going on with inside you, maybe with potential family members, and get that foundation in recovery. You have MAT, what's called medically assisted treatment. You have individuals, there are, you've heard of Suboxone, there's methadone, there's Vivitrol, there's different things out there, for an individual that can buy into treatment, in my opinion. And there's no statistic, this is just me, and I go around every day and I talk to individuals that are in the hospital. I talk to different hospital systems, from, the Mercies of the world, the Cleveland Clinics, the Metros, the Ohio Healths. I mean, this is what I do on a daily basis. Why? Because I've been in that hospital bed and I can relate to those individuals. But when someone says yes and they say, well, what does treatment look like? Treatment looks different for every person. When you come to at least Ohio Addiction Recovery Center and other inpatient treatment programs, there's not just one size fits all. You have to give a person, in our opinion, a kind of approach to what works for them. So some people might say, well, I'm an alcoholic, I kind of like AA. Well, let's pursue AA. Some people might say, well, I kind of like NA. Good, do NA. When someone's turned off and you tell someone that's struggling what they have to do, they're immediately going to tune you out. Even though it's good for them, and it can work, if they don't buy into treatment, then the chances of them staying sober are almost slim to none. But when there is that kind of aha moment. Like for me, I didn't realize I was an alcoholic until I was sitting in treatment, and then there was a lady that was sharing her story, and I was like, yeah, well, I have nothing in common like her, she's this, she's that. But her story was literally me, just, she's a young lady, and I was a young guy at the time. And that's when I realized, like, I've got problems. And once you have that kind of aha moment, you can wake up and start working on yourself. And how that works and looks like is different for everybody. There's the outpatient model, there's the inpatient model, there's the MAT model. It doesn't matter as long as you're working on yourself. For us, Ohio Addiction Recovery Center, we're not the cure. Someone comes in and they get medically stabilized, meaning that they're monitored by a doctor. This happens in hospitals as well. They're monitored by a doctor. They're coming off the substances that they're struggling with, whether it be alcohol, opiates, heroin, whatever that looks like. And then, in our opinion, from the residential component, you can start delving down into someone's issues. And I don't know the statistics, but this is just my assumption from doing what I've been doing for a while. 99% of the individuals that are struggling with some type of substance abuse issue are struggling with the mental health component as well. And that might be anything from anxiety, depression, all the way PTSD, bipolar, trauma. It doesn't matter. And from a treatment perspective, in our opinion, you can't just address the substance abuse issue, because if you're saying, well, you drink and you do drugs, that's great and we want to focus on that, but there's a whole other side of the coin that we have to look at, from the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD, because they both go together. And from a well-rounded treatment approach, when you're working on both sides of the coin, that can give that individual the opportunity to succeed in what life looks like afterwards, because life is going to be different once you hear the words of recovery and what that looks like. And if you realize and kind of have that moment of clarity and you say, you know what, I struggle, I have these issues. When you go into a program like ours or others or whatever type of treatment modality that looks like, then you can start working on yourself, and then you can say, you know what, I have this issue, let's pick what works for us. When I say Ohio Addiction Recovery Center isn't the cure, coming to treatment for 30 days, doing outpatient, that's great, and it's necessary in our opinion. Long-term treatment is the best approach for what we see, where you go to detox, you go to residential, you go to an outpatient program. If you want to do MAT and that's what you choose to do, stay on it, work with a therapist, but continuing to work, because guess what? When you get out of treatment, you've got bad days. And if someone's a drug addict or they were using, guess what? They know where to get drugs. And if they have a bad day, instead of going left, which they've always done, let's try to help them get a foundation in recovery and make it right. For an alcoholic, and I have a bad day, the shiniest aisle in the grocery store, at least in my community, the only aisle that has a wood floor is the alcohol aisle. Why? Because that's, what it's designed to do. It's designed to get you to come in. So the shinier that is, the more attractive it is, and the worse your day is. And if you don't have that foundation in some type of recovery program that you're working, then it's easy to go left, which you've always done, instead of making the hard choice and go right. For a lot of times there are barriers to treatment. The gentleman said, well, you've got 30 minutes to get someone in treatment. He's spot on. Someone says, okay, I'm ready for treatment. It might be their 10th time they've said it. It doesn't matter. There's a window, and that window starts closing. And it's up to us, everybody up here, and you all included, to help kind of feel that person's need while that window is open. Because once it's closed, you don't know when you're going to come back in, or when they're going to come back and be able to be entered into a program or outpatient, or what that looks like. There's 3 places you go if you are struggling with substance abuse. And this is guaranteed. You are going to go to jail. You are going to go to a treatment program. And the worst is you're going to die. Those three things are three options that you have when you are struggling and you're in the throes of your addiction. So it's up to not only you all, not up to the panel up here, the group of us to help these individuals that are struggling. What does that look like? I guarantee that you've seen signs of people that you know, that you love, that they might be using. Have that conversation. Yeah, they're going to throw a fit because why? You're calling them out on their crap. And when you call someone out on their crap and when someone starts getting defensive, it's probably because you're right. And it might be painful, but it's necessary. And you might have to have that 5 or 10 times. It doesn't matter. When the breakthrough happens, there are places like us and these individuals up here that are there to help. Another barrier to treatment is bed space. There's a lot more addicts out there and alcoholics than there are treatment beds. That's a bunch of hogwash, for lack of a better word. If someone wants to get into a bed and they're dedicated to get into treatment, they will get into a bed. Could it happen that 30 minutes? Everybody in their power is going to do that, at least everybody up here and other programs that are out there. Why? Because we know the severity of what happens if they don't get it. They might have to say, hey, you know what, there's a bed at Ohio Addiction Recovery Center, or they're full. Well, we're going to work with other different treatment providers to get them in and help meet that person's need, because it's not an individualized treatment approach as far as this facility, that facility. You know, there was a list of facilities up here at Mary Haven, React, Hope. We work with all of them. Someone's come into Mary Haven, it doesn't fit the criteria for whatever reason there. They're calling us, we're going to pick them up because we believe in facility-to-facility transfers. You've got the React team that's in Grant, and they're in Riverside and the other hospitals. Guess what? That person, they're talking to them in ER, they're calling us or other programs like us to go help them. So even though we're at different locations, we're all in this together. And what that is, that's because a majority of the individuals that at least work on this side of the fence in this industry, either A, are in recovery themselves, or B, they know someone, they have a loved one, or they have a passion to help. This is not an industry that, you know, you get into because you just want to say, hey, I just need a job, because it's the type of industry that will chew you up and spit you out quickly, because we hear the worst of the worst. But we are given gifts on a daily basis when we see that person that tried treatment 10 times and it didn't work. But the 11th time they came into us or a different program, and you know their story. Why? Because when they walk in, you know their date of birth, you know their social, they know what therapist to go see, because they've been kind of through the mundane roles of treatment. But that 11th time, it sticks. And guess what? That person goes to your sober living, and then, you know, 3 weeks later, they're in the IOP and they're working IOP, and they come in and you get that gift that says, wow, you know what? We deal with a lot of pain in this industry, but those small gifts where someone is successful and they're working a program, that's what keeps a lot of us going. And I can say that it keeps everybody here going, because you've got police, they see a lot of the worst of the worst. You have EMS, DEA, judges. We're dealing with people that are not where they want to be in life, but everybody up here and everybody in this industry and in the courts and police, and it took me a long time to realize this, we're here to help. So my suggestion is, if you have someone that you know that's struggling, or know someone that, you know, their family member is struggling, there's a list of resources between us and other programs. Just make that call, because that call starts a spiral effect. Instead of a downward negative spiral, which an individual's just been on, you can help lift them out of that. And it takes us all as a community to work towards and helping each individual. I always say, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, we're dealing with a lot of individuals, including myself when I was in addiction, that childlike mentality. So I challenge you all to, because you're here for a reason, and there are a lot of empty seats here that other individuals chose not to come and get the knowledge that you're getting now, to take advantage of what you've heard and apply it. That's all I got.